Death is so final. It's the end of life, or at least the end of life as we know it. In many ways, it's so simple, but it's also astoundingly complex, especially when it comes to the legal system. What choices do we have when it comes to our end of life, and what choices should we have? Lauren Danielle shares her personal story surrounding this very issue. Let's jump in and hear what she has to say.
I walked in to my parents' house, still in my sweaty workout clothes, and I was shocked to see so many first responders, police officers, and detectives in my childhood home. A place that had always been so full of love, so full of joy, and so full of warmth was now so unfamiliar. I was startled and dismayed, and I could barely utter the words, "Is my dad even alive?" The story begins with a man named Jerry, my dad, my role model, my hero. My dad was an all-star athlete, keynote speaker, and very successful man. He was hardworking, he was driven, and he was known for doing the right thing. My dad was incredibly selfless. Whether we were at the bar having cocktails and he was the first to give his seat to someone else, or after a long day at work and a long commute home, he always came in the door and asked how everyone else was. I can still hear his voice. "How was your day, Laura?" Anyone that knew my dad knew that he was logical and thought out. When it came time to make decisions, he would bring out the yellow legal pad, put a line right down the middle, pros on one side, cons on the other, carefully weighing in the opinions of others before he made a decision. Most of all, my dad was incredibly modest. He was full of integrity, and he never wanted to be the center of attention. Even in the most limelight moments of his career, he put others first. The story took a turn in 2013 when my dad was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. He battled this disease for many years, but the last two were the most challenging. In the beginning, we saw bad moments, a small tremor, or we witnessed what we would learn to call brain fog. By the end, we were managing his symptoms with cocktails of prescriptions, holding on to the good moments. We longed for just one more dad smile, just one more smirk. I remember as a little kid, even before I could drive a car, we would have difficult conversations. My dad was the philosopher. I'm the debater. When we would talk about legal euthanasia, he would say to me, "Lauren, people don't make their dogs suffer. Why do they make their loved ones?" My dad had made it clear that if his disease robbed his quality of life, he did not want to live. My dad had a DNR, do not resuscitate, a MOST form which tells medical personnel to not administer CPR in the event of an emergency, as well as a living will. I remember one day a life insurance agent came to the house to assess my dad's quality of life and ultimately if he could function independently. They asked him to complete very simple tasks. Get in and out of a chair, put on your shoes, butter a slice of bread. Not only were these tasks incredibly challenging for my dad, they required a massive amount of effort and they put him in significant pain to try to do. Even when the assessor determined my dad's poor quality of life and that he required full-time care, his end-of-life options were still denied. I remember one day we were driving home from one of our daddy-daughter luncheons, and he asked me to pull into a parking lot of a lake nearby the house. He said, "Laura, do you know why Robin Williams took his life?" I said, "No, Dad. I thought he was depressed." He said he was very sick and no doctor could help him. There were so many moments and memories that I wanted to share with my dad, including him walking me down the aisle in just a few more months. But I chose to put my needs and wants aside in order to truly understand how he wanted to live and how he wanted to die. I chose to listen selflessly. January 17th, 2020 is a day I will never forget. I had just finished teaching my group fitness class, and I realized I had a missed call from my stepmom. I knew right away something was wrong. She would never have called me at that time. As quickly as I could, I returned the phone call, and I was surprised to hear a detective on the other end. He asked me to identify myself, and most of the conversation is a complete blur. But I heard these harsh words: "Your dad shot himself." I fell to the ground. Fortunately, my very best friend was with me, and she drove me 25 minutes to my parents' house. It felt like eternity. When I walked in the door, I was overwhelmed with the amount of police officers, first responders, and detectives in my childhood home. While I was trying to process what happened, my stepmom was across the way. She's only 4'10" and 95 pounds. She had these mittens on her hands. And while we were awaiting the gun residue results, tears streamed down her face. I realized they were treating her as a suspect. This triggered me to ask the question, was my dad even alive? The answer we got was anything but expected. He's in surgery. What? Surgery? No! We had the DNR form. We had the most form. My stepmom screamed. We knew we had to get to the hospital. We had to intervene. This was not what Dad wanted. As we braved the hospital doors, my brain raced. I remember thinking, was this an accident? Is he in pain? What exactly am I supposed to do right now? My stepmom grabbed my hands. Her eyes pierced my soul, and she said, "This is the last thing we can do for your dad." Right then and there, a light switch went off inside of me. A power ignited in me that I didn't even know I had. It was crystal clear what we had to do. We had listened to Dad's wishes over the years, and we were 100% on the same page. Dad's final fight was up to us. As we entered the hospital, there was so much chaos, there was so much commotion. They moved us upstairs and downstairs, in of a room, out of a room, avoiding the inevitable, delaying a scene. Delaying the inevitable and avoiding a scene. But we were unstoppable in our pursuit to honor Dad's wishes. After a significant amount of time, the staff heard our requests and they stopped the surgery. When the surgeon entered the room, I remember feeling I was so angry. I wanted to yell with rage. I was pleading to please honor the DNR. But a shakingly childish voice said, "You wouldn't do this to your dog. Why are you doing this to my dad?" Looking back, we were able to make pivotal decisions in the moment because we chose to treat my dad how he wanted to be treated, not how we wanted to be treated. Here I am on this stage advocating for our loved ones to have choice. Many of you may know that Colorado has end-of-life options, most commonly known as death with dignity. However, not everyone qualifies. There are many stipulations, but what's most noteworthy is that the patient has to be declared terminally ill within 6 months. In 2019, 170 patients received aid in dying prescriptions under the Colorado End-of-Life Options Act, a 38% increase from 2018. But what about the people who are not labeled terminally ill? How many other people out there wish they had the choice to die? This issue is important to bring awareness to because it affects us all: doctors, nurses, first responders, and most of all, the ones we love. You may not know, I did not. Suicide negates a DNR. Legally, first responders must bring the individual back to the state they were in before the suicide occurred, because the assumption is that it was an irrational decision. Even though my dad thought he had done everything right, and even though we were honoring his wishes, he still was not being treated the way he wanted to be treated. How long does suffering go on before we think differently? I have been described as a catalyst for change, and my invitation to you is 3 simple steps. The first is to listen selflessly. So often we go through life thinking we know what's best, and it's imperative we listen to what others have to say. By the time we had to make decisions, there was no question. My dad had always carried the lantern, and even in his final moments, he led the way. The second is to treat others how they want to be treated. I could have so easily justified my dad fighting just a little longer. All I wanted was for him to walk me down the aisle in a few more months. All he wanted was to no longer be in pain and suffering. The third is to advocate. Turning a blind eye will not elicit change, and I believe we have a responsibility to take care of the ones we love. Right now, I shared with you one of the most challenging days of my life, as well as the simple steps that I believe can help. My dad suffered a horrific illness, and he was forced to take his life because there were no other options available. However, I want to leave you with a different picture. Imagine if you had a spouse, a significant other, that suffered every single day. What options would you want to be able to choose from? Imagine if you had a parent who was in chronic pain, who could barely get in and out of a chair, put on their shoes, or butter a slice of bread. What choices would you want available? Imagine if you had a child who was chronically ill and there was no solution promised. What choices would you want to be able to choose from? I believe that no one should make the choice that my dad had to make, and I encourage you to speak up so that there are choices readily available when we face our end of life. I once heard someone say that saving a man against his will is the same as killing him. To be clear, this is not about dying. This is about living. My dad was the ultimate giver. He gave everything he had to his friends, to his family, to his career, and to fighting Parkinson's disease. Even when he viewed himself, when I think of Shel Silverstein's book, The Giving Tree, even when he viewed himself as the old stump, he continued to give. He gave his courage, he gave his legacy, and he gave his dignity. Today, I give you my heart and our story so that you have freedom of choice. Thank you.